Steve and I met, I can't even remember how long ago it was, 2.5 years ago now. And we met initially for an hour and said, both of us had our watches set thinking how long we're going to have to stay with each other. And 3.5 hours later, we were still talking, really. And I think that was the sort of starting point.
So I wanted to sort of put down the gun. I said I didn't want to make a film again with a gun in it in any way. I wanted to make a film, a love story, really. And then we started talking. And we were talking about the internet and pornography, and then Abby was saying something like sex addiction, and that just sort of put alarm bells in my head, and that was a seed, I think.
My dad had died, and we talked about the fact that I'd watched him with only 3 days left to live, and I'd noticed he'd flirted with a nurse, and I just thought that was incredible that you still have that life force, even in the last few days of your life. And so I think we started to talk about the energy, the sort of sexual energy that you still have as a human being, I think. I think that was sort of...
Yeah, and also the accessibility of sexual content. I remember talking about when I was a kid. You know, the only time I got near to any pornography wasn't, top shelf of a newsagent, and now it's just 2 clicks of a mouse. And not to say that sort of sex addiction or this kind of affliction isn't sort of is a brand new addiction. No, I don't think so. But it's the accessibility of pornography, I think, sort of amplifies it even more.
It seems to be kind of a grey area, this idea of sexual addiction, I suppose because all of us were introduced to it probably through celebrity stories, and there's a certain, I suppose, public perception of sort of self-indulgence perhaps within that world. So what was interesting to discover was just how many people were claiming to suffer from it and how it wasn't being treated as an official sort of mental illness. And then it's just the various sort of factors. What was very important to Brandon's character and what Abby and Steve had really sort of put at the core of his character was this problem with dealing with intimacy and emotional content in any sort of relationship. And so trying to find that was I suppose, the hard part, because everything would sort of stem from that. So I was very grateful. I am very grateful, and I was very lucky at the time to meet somebody who was suffering from exactly that. And I think it's very difficult when you're talking to somebody like that and you're trying to sort of essentially extract information out of them. So by asking them direct questions, it's just not really so effective. People tend to be sort of on guard a little bit more. So I just asked them sort of, to tell me stories. And from those stories, I could get an idea of where certain motivations were born within a personality like that, and how somebody suffering from this condition actually deals with it in the situation. It's like how it sort of manifests itself physically, or even like an embrace. The idea of that is just you just want to sort of squirm your way out of it. So that helped me sort of get a physical life for that sort of inner life, if you like. So it really helped meeting somebody.
I think we're kind of fascinated now by the way we choose to interact sexually, be it, through webcam or even texting or Skyping, or that we have a different access point for sexual relationships, and in some ways maybe that's taken us further away from intimacy. So I think you could see that as a hot subject in a way.
The title came up through our interviews. That was the word that kept coming up all the time. This sort of shame, and it was it kept on sort of coming up all the time in interviews. And I thought, hey, well, it seems that that's quite a strong strong word to use.
When you sit in a room with somebody who is suffering from the effects of this compulsion, the word shame is just in the room, and it was very apparent from the people we met that was really the kind of point, the kind of centre of the compass, really, was that it came back to some innate shame. And it's interesting, one of the reasons why we did go to New York was that, we couldn't get anyone to talk to us over here. You can talk about, you can talk about drugs, you can talk alcohol, you can talk about gambling. For some reason, you can't talk about sex in the same way. So New York allowed us to go there and talk to these people. And again, shame, it was Steve that found it. It was Steve that went, this is the word. And I think Steve and I spent a long time with these people and then just quietly walking around the city together. And that feeling of shame bubbles up in you. You relate to it.
Thank you very much to the guests, and thank you for attending.
Thank you.